Today, me, a beginner pianist, is going to ask some questions to the master himself. I got 5 questions and a bonus for Ted. Let's do it.
Hi, this is Ted Barsulu with Alamo Piano Galleries. If you haven't already, look for us online at alamopianogalleries.com. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And, ask these videos, ask us questions, and we're here to talk everything music, particularly piano, even digital pianos. And today, this is Cooper's video. I'm here
back,
to get
dude.
interrogated.
Yeah, Ted hasn't heard any of my questions, but you might have seen we've done a few on this channel. I'm currently going through the process of practicing, learning. You know, I'm not necessarily in lessons. Most of my lessons are here, hanging out with Ted at the store. But like anybody, last time we talked about chords and visualizing, building chords, all that. The majors, you got Oreos, reverse Oreos, all the good stuff. But for me, some of the things that I'm finding the most difficult are things that I think you can read articles online, you can look stuff up, but if you're not able to have a teacher with you or you're not able to have somebody that's as experienced as Ted to kind of talk you through it, I got a few questions, some related to playing the piano, some related to just pianos themselves or your influences. Gotcha. But my first question, I think if you are getting started playing or if you can remember when you started playing, is one of the hardest things for me. And it's making my hands independent because I can hit, bass notes over here, form a chord, and then play some sort of melody. But I'm having a hard time making my hands kind of independent from each other and keeping a bass line going, doing something on my right hand. So how would you advise me or anybody else that's trying to get in the groove of separating the hands?
Okay, there's a couple of things.
Yeah.
And so to start basic, let's just say we're on a chord. Mm-hmm. It can be any chord, but I want you to think of the part, Carole King song. I Feel the Earth Move.
Okay. Yeah.
Because all she's doing on that, she's got her chords, but it's bass and snare, kick and snare. It's a drum set. And you hold this one down. To relate to it on guitar, it's when you're holding a bar chord or something, you're getting 2 parts out of the same position.
Yeah.
And that's all that piano is.
Yeah.
Because you're playing the same thing in different spots. And guitar is the same thing too.
Yeah.
So the way to do it is breaking the reliance of one hand is you literally have to think about separating your hemispheres in your brain. So, and then try not to think about the fact that this side of the brain controls this side of the body. And your ears cross and your eyes cross. So it's really confusing. But the idea is you pick a left or a right side, whichever is. For me, it's always been the low part. Yeah. So my left foot keeps a good kick drum and my right foot's a good snare. Yeah. Now, that's just going to be like, you keep straight quarter notes or, a half note here when you hit. Yeah. The other part is if you rock, just like you do on a guitar where you have bass, you're rocking between the low part and the high part of the instrument. So you can hold one note down. There's 3 notes, say there's 3 notes in a chord. So you hold one, so you go 1, 2, 3, 4, once. Or you can just break the chord up. It's real easy to play three notes in 3/4 times because dun, 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 okay? Yeah. And in 4/4 time, which is almost all rock and roll and country music, you can just add an extra note, either the 6th or the octave, if you can reach it, so that you'd have. And then you can speed that up. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you know your 8th notes go in between. And so you start doing the same thing with both hands, but you start doubling this one to hit twice as many. And that's one way to work on it. And the other one is to hit dun, 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 dun. To just hit them all at once. So practice keeping your straight downbeat. Yeah. And start off slow and speed up until you get the disco pace where it's 4 on the 4. You start playing stride with the disco beat. It's pretty cool. That's the best way to do it, is to break it up rhythmically.
Got you.
And to try to get 2 parts out of your left hand. You know what I mean by that? So just like your thumb, and there's that natural up
Yeah.
The other part on guitar, you hit that thumb and you strum up before you get to that next beat, right? All right.
Yeah.
Do both of that with
So
one
just
hand.
break it up with the beats and yeah. Oh, that's fair. I think it's tough because for me, I always think about rhythm being kept on the right side, whether it's hi-hat, whether it's strumming, whether it's,
Right.
kick, but
Right.
I am working on it. It always feels good to get the groove going. That's the toughest thing for me right now.
That idea you said, you think of the rhythm coming on the right side, that's perfect for you. Because all you need to do is play a slower rhythm over here.
Yeah.
Because even if you're a drummer, most drummers that are right-handed, all that,
all the
it's
fast
all in
stuff
the right
comes.
hand. Okay, it's all in the right side. So you can keep that same thought. Because all the fast stroke, all that stuff on the guitar and the high end, it's all in the right. But down here, it's moving, you can move twice as fast. You do the same thing on piano, or twice as slow.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay, so it is still from the right.
Well, that's all I needed to hear right there. So now moving from the hands to the feet, for any beginner, myself included, it's easy to rely too heavily on a sustain pedal.
Mm-hmm.
If you were my official teacher and we were sitting down for a lesson, how would you tell me to understand and use the pedals, all three on a piano, to my advantage? Because I think everybody knows the sustain, but when the other two come in, and also how to, tastefully use the sustain pedal, how would you visualize those?
That's a great question, because when people come into the store, you can tell right away the level and of their playing based on how they use the pedals.
Yeah.
Particularly the sustain pedal, because some people just go on it like it's a
lead
gas
foot on
pedal.
it.
Think it's like driving a car, and that's not really what it's about. But the best way to do it would be to break it down. Say you have a slow ballad that's like in 4/4, 12/8. Like for example, "Color My World."
Yeah.
Every time that measure hits, the next measure hits on a downbeat. You want to clear the heart and start clean, so that the growth that you get from that first dun 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 dun, you get to do it twice, pedal off and right back on to the next one.
Yeah, so you're not bleeding over
So
chords onto each
right,
other.
you don't want bleed over. You don't want. Sometimes you do want bleed over dissonance if it's a slow moving thing and you're trying to create your own reverb, because you can create reverb inside a piano harp with the strings, and you can with some of the digital models that have good polyphony.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you really want to try to work on it. You know what I mean? You just have to listen up. But the main thing is, a lot of times, like if it's a country song, I mean, almost you can keep. If you watch players like country players and stuff, if they're wearing a boot, there's a reason why, because that heel puts that foot flatter, okay, and they can just ride on their heel. A lot of drummers wear boots for that reason, okay, or some of them. Everyone's got something with their feet, but the idea behind it is that you can pump half notes, quarter notes, depending upon what you're doing. If you're playing a real fast lead, well, certainly everyone's going to want that sustain on, but that bleed over is going to be there. And the difference between a lot of jazz players is they don't use the sustain. Yeah. And there's a lot of times I think, man, I'm recording a part for a song. You got to sit on one hand so you don't overplay, and put your foot behind so you don't use the sustain, and you're just really playing that part straight like a guitarist. Yeah. That's another way to get rhythm back into your right hand, independent of the count. Yeah. Just learn right-handed parts that dun, 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 dun. Learn those kind of punch parts that guitar players play. Just the right-hand part on piano, and you'll advance real fast because you know all your chords on guitar.
I do, yeah.
So it's easy to.
Then for me, should I even be considering the two other pedals, or should I just be focusing on?
If you wanted to play something lighter and soft, always use that left pedal. Yeah. Now, on an upright, the middle pedal can have a couple of different functions depending upon the level of upright.
Mine's
Some of them,
got
it's
the damper,
and that's call it quiet mode or practice mode. And those are great because that allows you to practice and not drive other people in the house nuts. I wish they had those when I was growing up. Yeah. Because that was a later invention. I was post-teenage by the time that thing was invented.
I like it because sometimes it kind of sounds like an electric piano.
It does. It lessens the blow against the string, and certainly it deadens the sound. Yeah. And it removes a lot of the precision in the hammer strike as well. So that hammer blow kind of goes into sort of the notes next to it, and you know what I mean? That felt spreads it out. Yeah. And it is a different sound. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it gives you a tendency to hit harder and you don't get the result. So it's a lot like like a whirly or a Rhodes or something.
Yeah.
It's a cool feel.
So back to the keys. For me, whenever I'm talking to somebody about guitar, I feel like the biggest problem with, like you said, you can gauge somebody's skill level on guitar based on how quickly and seamlessly they are changing chords. And I think that's a big problem for early players. Now, for me, when I started picking up piano, it was all 1, 3, 5 triads for your chords. But you kind of have that first realization moment when you're in, say, a C, and you have, C, E, G, and you want to move to the 4, just move your middle and ring finger up, and you got an F chord. How do you approach, and for a beginner player, how would you kind of move into the world of inversions and finding the easiest chord changes that don't require you to just keep that one shape and,
Yeah, the idea behind that is what I call hand positions. Okay, so let's take let's take a classical piece of music, for example, and we're going to find some classical piece of music in key of C. So it's going to be all white keys.
Yeah.
And you're going to go through and read it. And now I write a lot of fractions when I write my notes. Okay, so it'll be like C, then it might have a slash with an E underneath it. That's just a C chord with an E in a bass.
Yeah.
Okay, those are different voicings. That doesn't mean that that's what's exactly on that chart.
Yeah.
Okay, what's on that chart might have an E down here with a C here and then an arpeggio up, but at least I know that's the hand position to attack that one phrase or that change at. So a lot of times you'll see E, A, B written all over like Moonlight Sonata, or B with all these fractions, different basses, bass notes over those chords. The idea behind that is it's a hand position, just like it is on guitar.
Yeah.
If it says like A, then A, I can go like, those little motions need to be practiced. Okay, because that's the next step with the Oreo and the all white and the black, white, black, is that learn the 1, 3, 5 plagal cadence, bum, 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 for every single one of those keys, because that gives you the root to the 4th, back to the root to the 5th with the 7th in it, so it resolves. Okay, so bum, 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 bum. And so that way there you learn how to make every single one of those just like changing harmonicas.
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of times it's real easy if you can reach an octave. Because the stuff in the middle is almost pretty much the same. It is the same, but how you finger it is based on hand position.
Yeah.
So once you memorize the structure of a chord, and you can play an arpeggio for each one of those chords, including D flat and F sharp, because the arpeggios on black keys are tricky.
Yeah.
The ones that start on black keys, most of them have them in it, but I mean, they can get tricky pretty fast.
Yeah.
Only because it's easy to flub up. And if you don't practice them, you'll flub up. But in that process of just learning the scales and the arpeggios with each one of those chords in root position, like, you play the scale in chorded position when you have that diminished chord back to the top, that right there shows you all the internal movements.
Yeah.
And memorizing it, just like the advantage on guitar is that when you learn that open string, E, A, B, and you learn that where you're playing that without your index finger, and you just lay that down, you have the whole instrument in that form, no matter what key it is.
Yeah.
And then you learn that E, A, B. Sometimes you go up a third one and you play this other chords that are, 2 of them are like E with the bar and the other one's like flat. So that's a modulation. You go right back to where you work. Piano works exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And the hand positions allow you to get all those cool parts that the musicians invent when they're recording the song.
Yeah.
And guitar is really cool because it always comes down to finding those 3 to 5 magical notes in every song. Yeah. And that is better than the hook, because the hook is the melody line.
Yeah.
And there's people that are masters at finding those 3 notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one thing that I'm kind of looking forward to, is being able to do different voicings, different hand positions of chords more seamlessly, because especially if I'm playing with somebody that's on guitar, I'm trying to follow them on piano, it's so easy for me to go back to just triads, but there's so much moving around that, I would,
right.
But I think pedals, left hand, and voicings of chords are the kind of things that I'm working on right now. This is a question purely for you. When you're in my position, when you're just kind of getting started, what piano player listening to them taught you the most?
I listen to a lot of different piano players. Now, you have to understand, you're starting off at an older age than I was, and I was very impressionable to whatever my parents were listening to.
Yeah.
And but my first experience with a piano as an instrument, and the first time I really sat around the piano, I think I was in probably a kindergarten class.
Yeah.
And the teacher played and sang for like 3 or 4 hours every day before lunch. And then she'd feed us. I mean, most of us, it was recess time and singing, and then she'd teach some lessons, but then the kids would eat and take a nap, and then they'd get up and get homework and go home, because it was half day. You know, it's stressful being a little kid. Yeah. But we'd get right around the piano, and she'd play and sing songs. And I'd learned a lot of songs that way, songs like children sing.
Yeah.
When I first started playing, it was pretty confusing, because I learned old school, where you didn't play that piano any faster than you could understand the notes on a page. And that's like sitting a toddler down in their high chair and giving them a dictionary and teaching them how to talk through that book. Yeah. And that's not a way to learn a language. Yeah. The best way is to be stuck in a nursing home with a bunch of bad musician cats playing piano and just listen to them for like 4 or 5 years. By the time you're going to be playing. Yeah. It's just you pick up whatever people do. Yeah. And the important thing is, I did listen to a lot of this. Roger Williams and Ferranti and Teicher, they were 2 pianists that did borderline music, but they were big showmen. Yeah. And always a lot of Liberace. Yeah. Mostly because he played a lot of classical music, but his renditions were actually harder than some of the original pieces. Yeah. And he cut out all the parts that sound like someone else's anger. Yeah. Because that's not anything he ever liked to express on the piano, so he just went for the good parts. Yeah. That is important, but then I listened to a lot of Elton John when I was really making progress, because what he does is just exactly what I told you. He plays that piano like a guitar player plays guitar. There's going to be a moment where you're playing piano, and all of a sudden you're going to be playing, and everything you're doing you're going to be able to see a chord pattern and a structure, and you're going to know every inversion. It's going to be like magic. And that's the moment where you're going to have everything that you know how to do on guitar. You're going to realize, I can do it on piano. Yeah. And it's kind of like when I was first learning a foreign language, and you take this and when you go there and you're using it and everyone's speaking this language, you can't hear the breaks in the words, and then all of a sudden one day you start seeing a sentence. Yeah, it starts written and spelled right. Lens. You know, and it's like, whoa, it's working. Totally. So the same thing happens in music. It really does. If you know one instrument and you fool around with another one, all of a sudden it's like the floodgates open up, and you feel a lot more natural at it. So my last real question, and then I have a fun one for the end. These are all fun. But I already have the piano, but if I played around here in the store and I asked you, what's the best type of piano for a new person to learn on? Because I think about that with guitars a lot. It's easy to say this is an easy one for somebody to learn on, and then this one with a big thick neck and a 2-inch nut width, that's maybe not the easiest for a beginner. Are there pianos that are easier for a beginner to start with? Yeah, and you have to remember too, the reason why manufacturers, and I forget this a lot, because sometimes we're so busy with thinking music and proper balance, but there's a large portion of music students and music hobbyists and even professionals that may be getting up there in years. Not talking about myself, but it does happen. And I've known some great classical pianists that can't play piano anymore, but they can play keyboards. They can play spring-loaded keyboards and get around. Of course, they're getting up there in years, whether it's arthritis or just basic old age or other things going wrong, or some other kind of thing that is a challenge, okay? Mm-hmm. There are easy playing keyboards. There are some that have smaller keys. There aren't enough that have reduced keys for people of different age and hand sizes. That's something that I would really like manufacturers to consider, especially in the digital age, because a plastic mold is a plastic mold.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why every plastic mold for a digital piano in the world has to have the same standard key width, especially if you can make one where, say, a 7 or 8 year old could reach an octave.
Yeah.
And then maybe even a tenth. So because there are players that could play full out list Rachmaninoff and Chopin's with tenths in it, they just can't physically reach it.
Yeah.
And if they could reach it, they could play it. And so but the keyboard to use around the store, and for any beginner, I highly recommend. And even though I love acoustic instruments, if they can live with a digital, because you can close yourself off and get that privacy if you're living with other people or around other people, like in an apartment complex, or if you just have close neighbors. Because a grand piano, after 12 midnight to 3, 4 in the morning, which is my favorite time to play, is not everyone's favorite thing.
Yeah.
To hear scales and arpeggios and Hanon and all the gross diminished chords just because, it feels good to practice. Well, who wants to listen to that?
I'll listen to it.
Yeah, so that, and also any of the digital pianos, and there are some that have lighter actions than others. They're spring-loaded. Again, get what you can afford, get what you're going to use a lot of, and get something that has a bit more of a challenge in it than what you think. In other words, just don't go buy the bare minimum because you're going to get bored with it and leave it aside. Leave some new features. Buy a nicer guitar that compels you to practice. Some people have to. That's why a lot of people go out and buy really expensive golf clubs, so they feel compelled to use them. If I don't pay enough for them, then I won't get very good. If I pay more, then I'll use it.
Yeah. So on that note, last question for you. Currently, what is your favorite piano to play in the store right now?
My favorite piano to play in the store is any one of the GXs.
Yeah.
I really love the GX pianos. But that's because I know what I'm going to get every time. But there's always a personal favorite. Right now I have two. One of them I think is going away. It's the SF-10 that we've had, that old Baldwin. It's about a 20-some-odd-year-old model. It's a great instrument. I think we shot video on that. We featured that at one point. And then we also have this gigantic 9-foot-plus Mason and Hamlin, which I really, really like, but we need to get a few more quirks worked out of it. I had a great time tuning it. It's a great instrument to tune. And I always have some favorites. I mean, every now and then, we'll get some Spinet, whether it's an old great manufacturer Spinet, a Yamaha or a Baldwin Spinet, and you tune it up, and it's just like, this is a great instrument. Yeah. And some of those are just not even $1,000.
It's the same thing with guitars, because you see it when we get something in that's a little special. I always bring it to Ted. But yeah, I think it's fun. We always talk about what's the coolest guitar here in the shop right now. Rarely we talk about we got this one thing in, whether it's a new one or a used one. We've always got something.
Usually everyone, there's never really been a problem if it's an older instrument and it's been finely cared for most of its life. And fortunately for pianos, some of them get a new life by having, remanufactured or refurbished. And there's that old Chickering right over there that's just like a dream piano. Yeah. And it's so old, it has real ebony and ivory keys on it. But that's an attraction thing. Yeah. The real nice thing is that soundboard is just as old. And when you hear that thing, it's like, yeah, this is what you're used to hearing on a piano. Yeah. And that little Baldwin, any of the old ones are always really attractive. Yeah. And it's hard to explain why this is your favorite piano when you have these others that play great and consistent. But some of those sound so good, it's not the sound that you heard growing up. Yeah. And, the recorded pianos that you heard on, especially pop recordings, there's some pianos that are out of tune. And if that piano was perfectly in tune, it doesn't sound like the song. Yeah. And perfect example is you hear those opening chords of Let It Be. That piano's out of tune in a way that it never has been since. Yeah. And it's going to be real hard to go in and mimic that exact tuning on those Get Back sessions for that.
Was that a Bluthner?
That Bluthner piano they used. And it's gradually, it's really interesting. It goes out of tune as the sessions go on. You can hear it. Until when they finally got to the ones where they put the notes, this was the take, you can, that's it. Because early on, the piano was in too good a tune. Yeah. And it doesn't sound like that piano. Yeah. And then as they go through it,
it warms up. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah. Thank you very much. I would say that if you're out there and you watch the channel, you're looking for a piano, you're trying to figure things out, we got an incredible resource with Ted, and any questions you have, put them in the comments, call the store, email us, because that's what we're here for, is answering the questions. I've got more, so we'll be back here at some point, but that's...
Still have a piano lesson to follow up.
Yeah, we got to learn some minor chords, dude.
That's
about time. But yeah. Ted,
I'm Ted Barsalou.
I'm Cooper Greenberg. Visit us at Alamo Piano Galleries.
Alamo Piano Galleries.
We got pianos all over the country.
That's right.
And,
I didn't even announce that, did I? We have 9 stores.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, they're all
9
over
stores.
the place.
So, I mean, we got pianos everywhere, and we probably have something good for you. But if you have questions, leave them in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.